the funkiest song about suicide that I've ever heard.
Go subscribe, yeah, subscribe.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Brews and Reviews. It's knowledge, and yeah, I am a little excited for this, as you can tell, because that is my signed A Piece of Strange poster that I got in 2006 right after the album dropped, when I saw them on tour. Not only is it signed by CunninLynguists, but it's signed by Tonedeff, Substantial, and Pac FM. Everybody that was at that show, great time. Also got all my CunninLynguists albums in the background, the Phantom Limbs album, and I got more where that came from. But this ain't about me. This is about a great collaboration that we first heard in 2015 on Phantom Limbs, and that is Kno and Sadistik, Bring Me Back When the World is Cured. And man, it's been a long time, such a long wait since we heard Kno's production. I think the last CunninLynguists album was in 2017, and hearing this, it's immediately apparent that his production is what's been missing from my life. This is the follow-up to their stellar EP, Phantom Limbs, one of the best projects of 2015. I still get chills when I listen to some of the tracks on that album, In Heaven especially. And the first time that I really heard of Sadistik was on Castles from Strange Journey 3, which also featured Aesop Rock, and the chemistry of Sadistik over Kno beats was apparent from that very beginning. Now we are blessed with their longest form collab, 18 songs from the incredible duo. Let's get to it. Burning Sun. Kno is in trademark form from the beginning, as this track would sound right at home on Death is Silent, with the obscure vocal sample eerily piercing through a mellow melody before the drums kick in, and the poetic words of Bring Me Back When the World is Cured. I dreamed in black under burning suns are repeated for maximum effect of pulling us into this concept. You don't know. What I don't know is how much praise I can give this production before you all get bored of me, but I'm probably gonna do it on every track anyway. This is beautiful. Angelic hums and moans and a twisted vocal sample saying "you don't know" sung throughout. I really like what he's doing with the drums on this too. And Sadistik comes in with that staccato flow. And I think Sadistik is perfect over Kno's beats because in a way, his flow is very similar to Natti and Deacon at times. And that may sound strange given his voice and subject matter are so different than those guys, but it's that staccato flow that works, where they chop through the breathy atmospheric samples. And I could spend years deciphering these lyrics, but this one in particular stood out to me. He says, "Looked up to God, but he jumped the shark and left me hellborn. Maybe it was a mirage or a facade I fell for." Jump the shark is when they do something on a TV show that is so unbelievable that it's clear they're out of ideas. And this idea will come back throughout the album, most namely on the last track of the project. The earth was empty. Lots of alliteration on this, a technique Sadistik uses often. It makes his words sound so good together. Here he says, "Parody's a parody. These parakeets keep parroting anything they hear or see, even if it's heresy. Caroling, carrying the notes they know, so no clarity." But deeper than that, he's creating some kind of metaphor of the vacancy of Earth. And I think he means a mental vacancy rather than a physical vacancy. And he's got all these highbrow references like Sisyphus, the character from Greek mythology who was forced to roll a stone up a hill for eternity. But among all these high sophisticated metaphors, he slips in a pretty slick double entendre. He says, "Plus the peace I keep is unregistered, no assalamu alaikum." He's saying he keeps a gun, not peace. Assalamu alaikum means peace in the Muslim faith. It's getting heavy now. Ghostly Key. Kno is an expert with these foreign samples, which I think he explained at one point that there's not as many lawyers out there looking to sue over more obscure stuff that's from outside of the US. but he's mastered it, and I'm glad that someone can still make sample-based music in 2022. Kno does it expertly. While the sample seems to say music is the only way, Sadistik uses musical terms sprinkled throughout his verse. Staccato, spiccato, sonatas, and soprano. Get stigmata when the high notes go vibrato or legato. Obligato for da capo. Music is the language. When life becomes a prison, you can use it to escape it. Obligato is an instrumental stretch of music, so it's no accident that Kno provides some distinctive instrumentation right after Sadistik says this. Apple Valley, rhyming over Kno's beats. You don't even have to write a chorus. He's got it covered. It works well. Here, like every other track on the album, Sadistik seems to be portraying actual memories of his childhood, expressing a sadness of growing older. But the last line is especially interesting to me, where he says, "Age made fine wine out of ugliness." At first, it seems like he's saying he's aged like fine wine, meaning he's gotten better. But within the context of the other lyrics, I think he's saying that the ugliness grew and developed as he aged. Carnelian, lots of colorful imagery throughout these lyrics. Carnelian is a brownish red stone and color, which immediately conjures images of blood as he repeatedly refers to Christ dying. From red in the first verse to blue in the second, as he mentions the bluest opals, oceans, and luminol, a chemical that glows blue. And there's lots going on in these lyrics, and I'm going to break down some specific lyrics right here. He says, "Your Christ died, but I'm alive. In hindsight, I might have died." Almost like he's questioning if he's even alive now. Has he become a shell of a person or a shill? Is he sacrificing too much for his art, or is he being sacrificed for his art? He goes on, "Upon a cross with albatrosses, fireflies, and cyanide." Again, he's on the cross, martyring himself for this art. Him being a Christ-like figure is something that he'll refer to a lot on this project. He also says albatrosses and fireflies. They're mentioned a few times throughout the project as well. Fireflies are like enlightening somebody or bringing them wisdom, bringing them to the light, per se. And an albatross has traditionally been in literature a burden or something heavy that somebody has to wear. There was a famous poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where I've seen this concept as a symbol for a burden weighing somebody down, an albatross across the neck. Also note, if the fireflies are symbolic of enlightening somebody, if the fireflies are in cyanide, that's somebody poisoning the knowledge. So these albatrosses and fireflies and him being on a cross, he's saying it's a burden and a curse to be this revered as an artist, so much so that he's sacrificing himself. He goes on, "Get acid washed or idolized. I had to watch it with my idle eyes. After death, will he be acid washed or removed from history, or will he be idolized like Christ?" He just has to watch with idle eyes because he has no control over how the public treats his legacy. Finally, he says, "Revitalized in Babylon, I babble on in spiral lines." Here he's talking about his art that he's writing down in a spiral notebook or in cursive per se. These are his rhymes, the art or the sacrifices that he's making and bringing into the world. Mothlight. Of course, everyone is focused on Kno's samples and synth melodies that create the dark backdrop of his music, but let's not neglect to recognize how great Kno is with the low end as well. His bass lines are on point throughout this project, and perhaps at their best on this track, especially when Natti comes on, because Natti punctuates the bass even further with his voice as Kno switches the bass line up a bit for him. Sadistik delivers perhaps his best flow on the album, switching cadences several times throughout his verse, especially on these lines. He says, "While they spewed venom, I'd reach in the depths. Life is too pretty to keep me depressed." Can't say I've ever heard that specific style from him before. And it's also kind of funny that while he's doing doing that, you hear sheesh in the background, almost like you'd hear as an ad-lib on a trap joint, and this is far from that, but I'm glad to hear on such a lyrically dense album, there's still some comedy involved, and Kno always adds those comedic touches to serious endeavors. Drug metaphors throughout Natti's verse as he weaves in a symbolic story of street life that leads to all becoming enemies in a seeming cycle that will go on and on. Neptune Skin. It's interesting that they chose this as a single. I dig it in its uniqueness, but it's maybe not the most accessible beat. And also it's very short with just one verse, although it does play into the cover with the space imagery. Also, I thought this was worthy of note. He's referring to this painting when he says Hieronymus Bosch. It's a depiction of the Garden of Eden, then what happened after original sin, then damnation. There's definitely some crazy stuff going on in this. Check out the painting when you got time to really absorb it. 27 Club. That, of course, refers to that so many great musicians have died at the age of 27. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, and Kurt Cobain among them. Speaking of Cobain, Sadistik also references a Nirvana track later on the album. Being from Seattle, there's that connection there, probably to Jimi Hendrix as well. And this track is especially dark, basically saying that Sadistik should be in the 27 Club, and he talks about the different ways that he could join it, but betraying that concept by making you nod your head are hard drums from Kno, an expert use of alliteration used throughout and in the very first line when he says, "The silver tongue of Silver Lake, psilocybin still awake." Disappear, featuring Gifted Gab and Mibbs, who I didn't realize was from Pac Div until Sadistik mentions Pac Div in the flow. It's been a while since I heard Pac Div, but they were good. Gifted Gab also, not to be confused with Gift of Gab, rest in peace to the great Blackalicious MC, but Gifted Gab is a good artist in her own right, releasing a pretty good project with Blimes a couple years ago. I enjoyed that one. You should check it out. And despite the Northwest connection of these three artists, both Mibbs and Gifted Gab proved with their verses alone that they are very different from Sadistik. Case in particular from Mibbs when he says, "One night I hit the indicia and started thinking, why don't eggs taste like chicken? What comes first, the egg or the chicken? Is the universe glitching or am I tripping?" And Kno's going off with a warbling bass line to let Mibbs ponder these great questions of life. Where You Want Me, another single that dropped, and this one makes more sense. It's one of the more catchier tracks on the project, and from a guy who can get so dark, macabre, and deep with scholarly references, he sure can write a sincere love song too. There's beautiful imagery throughout this track, and we needed this break before the run that we're about to go on. But before we get to it, I'm going to drink to this track. I am sipping on an amber, Carnelian, perhaps it could have been called. This is from Wichita Brewing Company in Wichita, Kansas. This is a good amber beer, something not too crazy that I can sip on to try to absorb all of these lyrics. Rainclouds Part 1, Respect Knows bass lines. So many different styles of bass on this album too. He's not sticking to just a few techniques. He's showing off. Lucy Camp, another often dark themed wordsmith, keeping it somewhat in the family since she's on Tonedeff's label Quintic. Tonedeff, of course, Q and 5. That's where CunninLynguists got their start. And Lucy's understated, matter-of-fact voice somehow fits nicely engulfed in this universe of bass. The context of the lyrics work too, as she talks about being timid and numb and self-loathing, despite others saying that she's great. Sadistik himself is engulfed in worry or anchors in his mind, as he puts it, symbolized further by the consistency of the rain in the chorus. And as both MCs seem to draw parallels to this weather and their moods and feelings of entrapment. Rainclouds Part 2 is somehow got even more melancholy than the previous track with the keys and strings from Kno. He even mixes in a little guitar toward the end of verse 2. Sadistik begins both verses by saying that he's one step away from suicide, presumably, and that will come to play even more on the next track. It's interesting also that within this, he references the Nirvana lyrics, like I said he would. He says, "Love myself better than you," which is from the track On a Plane. And actually, in all of this talk about ending it, he has some great observations on life. He says, "Adam and Eve still taught me a lesson. Why make it sweet if they won't let you eat it? Get what you want and they won't let you keep it. Serpents assertive, they're showing their teeth." Also, more great lines that repurpose the title of he and Kno's previous work. He says, "I'm a bag of skin that's on display, phantom limbs still poking wounds. Reanimate what rots away, examine it, attach the skin and hope it moves." In other words, he's going through the motions of living, but amputated metaphorically from life itself. Damn, man. I think after this, maybe could we throw on Doing All Right from Southern Underground at this point? I think I need that to cleanse all this sadness that's going on. Blue Tree Meadow, it almost sounds happy at the beginning. Actually, this is the funkiest song about suicide that I've ever heard. I'm vibing. This is suicide. This is suicide. Everybody sing along. And remember when he said one step away on the previous track, turns out he was one track away from turning his wall into a Jackson Pollock painting. Again, we get the albatross metaphor pulling him down and images of life preservers becoming nooses. He expresses betrayal in this and that those close to him have disregarded him. And the last lines reference places where suicides take place a lot. He says in Acoquera Forest and Overton Bridge. The latter, interestingly, is known for dogs jumping to their death. And on this, Kno pretty much had to use the KRS-One sample that he uses at the end of the track, "Suicide, it's a suicide." Fits perfectly here. It was most notably used prior in the Gravediggers 1-800-Suicide, but it's been used by many since KRS-One first said it. Mulholland Drive, this is named after a David Lynch movie, and I know Sadistik and Kno are big fans. One of the best tracks off Phantom Limbs sampled The Lady in the Radiator from Lynch's Eraserhead, singing "In Heaven, Everything is Fine." So it's nice they made that call out again on here to David Lynch. And we get the first verse from Kno on this, as well as the sung chorus. And lyrically, he fits right in with the themes of this project. He says, "No one knows where you go when you expire, so desires can be deified if your feet to fire. Tree of life might go hasty when I seek to see the light. If I'm reading right, it's a sign I'ma leave tonight. Might take the exit off the 105, pushing 105. About to put my ride on its side. Hope I don't die." Quietus, something that causes death in a peaceful way, almost as a relief. And again, we get a different flow from Sadistik on this, and he almost sounds peaceful himself, presenting death as a release with a sing-songy flow. GODMODE, another single. This one is fitting too, since he's been telling us throughout the project that he's a Christ figure, and an incredible flow throughout this. GODMODE flow is what he's also saying, like when he says, "Oxygen levels are nada, persona non grata, I author stigmata, armadas of trauma, I'll burn with the gods, I'm a martyr, then turn it to autumn sonata de nada." He also references giving his blood to Dracula's, again showing how he sacrifices for his art and those around him who don't put in the blood and pain that he does, but still reap the benefits. And at this point, you kind of wonder if this death or suicide is symbolic of what he does to himself and the reason he's comparing himself to Christ throughout. In a sense, Christ's death was a suicide if he was indeed God. and sent himself here only to die? And that may be what Sadistik is really saying, and what he's doing with his art. He's doing it to himself, putting it out there and martyring himself. Serpens, the trial of Lucifer. The structure of this reminds me a little of the gates from A Piece of Strange, with the back and forth in a trial-like setting where a judgment for damnation will be placed. It's a slightly different take, though, with Kno playing the voice of God and Sadistik the devil, but twisting the fable on its head, with the devil questioning God's motives and who is really good and evil in the world, with God seemingly omnipotent and doing nothing to cure the world. He says, when misery is present, you don't fix it or give sympathy. You clipped my wings. I used to be an angel. You remember that? And he concludes, self-righteous demagogue applauding when they writhe in vain. While your right is rain, you write the rain until they die in pain. He's saying that God is always right, yet he created the rain and misery and bestowed it upon living things until they die. I felt like Phantom Limbs was so good that we needed more. I wanted it sooner than 7 years, but it was worth the wait. 7 years later, we got 18 tracks, all immaculately produced, concepts, extended metaphors, beautiful dark imagery, all woven through many different flows and cadences. This is a damn near perfect album, as almost all of Kno's work is. This guy can create a mood like no other. If you like intricate beats and lyrics, give this a listen. In fact, give it multiple listens before passing any judgments or ratings on it, because it will take a while to absorb. I'm going to give Bring Me Back When the World is Cured an 11 out of a 12 pack. That's better than a perfect 10, y'all. And now I'm just looking forward to the next CunninLynguists album, or maybe Chico and the Man. I know I'm not supposed to say that if Kno or Tonedeff happen to be watching, but yeah, I'm still looking forward to Chico and the Man, the Underground's Detox. Thank you for watching my review of Kno and Sadistik. Bring Me Back When the World is Cured. If you like this, go ahead and hit like now and hit me up in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know why in the comments. I drop hip-hop and hops related content consistently, so subscribe to my channel now, and until I see you next time, keep buzzing. Fucking man says subscribe.
But if he's on his channel saying that somebody's album is better than mine, unsubscribe to that motherfucker.
No, your album's the best, man.
There you go. Subscribe.
Yeah.
Subscribe.